This story takes place numerous a long time prior, when I was camping alone out in California. I haven't gone camping in numerous a long time presently, but when I was more youthful, I would go on numerous end-of-the-week camping trips to urge out in nature by myself and unwind. I did these camping trips very habitually, nearly each other end of the week it felt like. I adored being out in nature, but did not just like the inconvenience of resting on the ground in a tent. For how frequently I went camping, it made sense for me to purchase a little small camper that would connect and portion of the bed of my truck. It was truly decent and seemed comfortably fit me, and indeed one more in the event that I required. One of my end-of-the-week trips, I drove around 5 hours absent from my house to a wonderful region that I hadn't been to before. I went through the day doing a long climb, and after that cooling off in a quiet lake amid the evening. By night time, I had stopped my truck in a calm farther range, sort of up a mountain, so that I seemed to have a pleasant sea when I woke up in the morning. I was still up perusing a book by spotlight when I listened strides exterior, and somebody drawing nearer the truck. Regularly, I do not ever have individuals strolling any place close my truck, so it was odd to hear for beyond any doubt. Perhaps I had stopped in a terrible spot, or some place I wasn't permitted to be, and some person was coming to let me know. Either way, I didn't feel comfortable, especially since it was after dawn at this point. I called out a welcoming of "Hi, who's there?" as the strides drawn closer. A rough male voice reacted, saying, "Howdy there. I fair needed to check out your camper, beautiful clever." I was truly very comfortable laying in my bed within the camper within the back of the truck, so I hollered out that I seem appear them the camper within the morning, accepting they were maybe camping adjacent. There was no reaction from the man exterior for what felt like 1 or 2 of minutes. At last, I listened to him murmuring to himself, but couldn't make out anything of what he was saying. Expecting that was that, I went back to perusing. Strangely, in spite of the fact that I didn't listen any strides withdrawing absent. The man had to still be standing there. He was, and after some minutes, I listened strides moving around my truck, but still not clearing out. There were minor small porthole-like windows on the side of my camper, which I kept secured with shades at night. I looked exterior, but couldn't see the man at all, and it sounded like he had strolled to the front of my truck. Following thing I know, I listened a few compounds beginning from the hood of my truck, and in the long run getting closer to me. Whoever this individual was had the daringness to climb onto my truck and creep onto the roof of my truck towards the camper within the bed of it. I was the individual who took exceptionally good care of my truck, and this fellow was pissing me off to say the slightest. I shouted out, alerting the person that I had a gun with me, and if they didn't get off my truck and take off, I was reaching to come out with my weapon. I listened the man get off of my truck and walk absent a bit, but I still didn't listen their strides. Blur absent as they would have on the off chance that they had totally cleared out. I got out of my camper with the gun and my spotlight. Upon indicating the electric lamp around, I saw the man hunkering down close a bush around 40 feet absent. As the electric lamp lit up him, he sponsored absent more distant into the obscurity. I had had sufficient with whoever this individual was. At this point, I didn't know on the off chance that it was someone who had gone on drugs or someone crazier, but I yelled to him to take off and not come back. I was as of now up at this point, and was driving back domestic within the morning besides, so I stuffed my stuff up and headed domestic early. Whether it be due to terrifying experiences, such as I had with the individual or something animal related, I've continuously had my gun with me when I went camping, and I'm appreciative that I had it on me that night. Numerous a long time back, a friend and I'd chosen to require a bike trip together. Our objective was to bike most of the day on bicycle trails, and after that discover a put to camp at night. We'd have made great advance towards our destination and arrived in approximately 2.5 days. We were aiming to unwind within the little town that we were in for the rest of the day by swimming within the lake and getting a pleasant supper in an eatery after eating beans and bread for the last couple of days we had been biking. The bicycle trails we were on didn't truly have any great camping spots, so we had been finding places that would work, just like the edges of parks and the backs of cemeteries. We found a calm spot within the cemetery to camp for a night sometime recently, beginning the final half of the trip back domestic the following day. The spot we found truly was decent. It was at the back zone of the cemetery, out of sea from the most road, and there was a decent range of mulch which we set our tent up over to rest on. That night was to the night sometime recently, the 4th of July, so there was a conventional sum of firecrackers which my companion and I observed sitting exterior in our tent. The sun had as of now set, and whereas we sat outside our tent, there were different occurrences where we felt like we saw something move, or a few sort of movement, out of the corner of our eyes. My companion and I had as of now rested in burial grounds prior on this bicycle trip, and we had gotten into the propensity of strolling around and perusing graves because it was something to do to pass the time. Somewhat since of the odd developments that we felt like we were seeing, and incompletely since we were bored, we snatched an electric lamp and started strolling around checking out the range. We faltered over one grave that disheartened us. It was a baby's grave with a bunch of toy cars on the edge of the grave. We ordinarily didn't get spooked in memorial parks, but we both glanced at each other because it got really windy and chilly for a second, and after that halted us before long because it begun. Down the street from us, we saw a tiny opaque figure floating absent from us. It was a child-sized figure that we saw for a number of seconds. Sometime recently it essentially vanished. Completely spooked presently, we went back to the tent and had a fretful night of rest, waking up frequently. We were both soothed when we woke up, whereas the sun was rising, and we seemed start to pack up and begin our ride domestic. I opened the fold of the tent and was around to step exterior when I saw something lying on the ground right exterior of the tent. There were 2 toy cars lying exterior, the same sort from the grave that we had seen final night. After both my companion and I swore that we didn't get up within the night and move those cars, we strolled them over to the baby's grave, and beyond any doubt sufficient, there were 2 purge spots where cars had been final night. We wrapping up our stuff and were on our way, taking off the burial ground. I had never previously believed in spirits of any kind, but I wasn't skeptical, any more as I had seen with my claim eyes, that there was a few sort of nearness at the cemetery we had remained in. One or two of a long time prior, a gather of companions and I arranged a camping trip in Yellowstone Stop. The 4 of us had been camping numerous times in national parks, sometime recently, but never won the measure of Yellowstone. It was getting to be close to a week-long trip of touring and getting a charge out of nature. We had arranged out well the primary couple of days of the trip, deciding where we would be camping and places to see. After those to begin with couple of days, in spite of the fact that we didn't have much of a plan, and we had chosen that portion of the experience was being unconstrained and going wherever interested us. The primary portion of the trip went well as we saw a lot of popular traveller attractions and had fun hanging out at night around our campsite. Towards the conclusion of the trip, be that as it may, we were seeking out for a campsite to camp for the night and had a difficult time finding one. We were within the range of our trip where nothing was arranged. It was as of now dim out, late at night, and each campground within the adjacent zone that we gone to was as of now full, and didn't have any room for us. Eventually, we drove past an open parcel zone that had a few scattered fire pits made with stones and looked like a great spot to camp at. The range wasn't online and didn't appear up as a named campsite on Google Maps, but clearly individuals had camped there some time recently. The zone was purge and we didn't see anybody, so we chosen to set up camp there for the night. We had to set up the tent within the dim with spotlights. It was as of now late, so not at all like the other evenings of our trip. We didn't truly hang out. We fair got into the tent and fell sleeping generally quickly. I woke up within the centre of the night. My companions had shaken me wakeful and discreetly whispered that something appeared off. Quickly, I caught on what they were talking around since, from the woods encompassing our campsite, there was an odd number of winged creature sounds being made. It was still the centre of the night and not near to morning, so truly there ought to have been no birds making sounds. But instead, there were numerous distinctive sorts of winged creature sounds each couple of minutes. As a group, we concurred unobtrusively and without turning on any sort of light to exit our tent and check it out. We cleared out the tent and finished up clustering right next to our car, which was right another to the tent since we had utilised the headlights for setting up the tent prior. As we held up for our eyes to adjust to the dull and take note on the off chance that we may see anything, the winged creature sounds got closer, but at that point ceased altogether. At that point, we knew that those sounds were not ordinary, which it had to be individuals communicating to each other, as they had been coming from different bearings of the woods. It as it were took a speedy non-verbal see at each other to decide that getting within the car would be the most astute thing to do right presently. After scrambling to induce in and after that turn on the motor and lights, what we saw at the edge of the woods line running towards us was shocking. There were two people running towards us. I call them people since I do not indeed know on the off chance that they were men or ladies, since of how messy and feral looking they were. We drove out of there as quick as we may, seeing 3 more individuals on the inverse side of the wood line when our headlights lit up over that way. We drove through the night all the way until we had made it out of Yellowstone stop, abandoning our tent since all of us had our critical resources that we required as of now within the car. None of us can review or decide what zone of the stop we were in, but it unquestionably wasn't any place close a populated campground. We concurred to cut our camping trip a bit brief and buy an inn for the final night. We didn't go camping together once more for an awfully long time after that frightening night in Yellowstone. My family time offers a cabin on a lake, and we go there almost once a month. We have a lovely huge family, and oftentimes we welcome up companions or critical others with us as well. Since of how swarmed the resting circumstance can get interior the little cabin, a bunch of us, regularly the more youthful grown-ups, will pitch a tent exterior to rest within. The best spot for the tent to be set up is on the sandy beachfront right by the water, since it's milder than the yard. One end of the week towards the conclusion of July, there were numerous individuals remaining at the cabin. That end of the week, it was an idealized night exterior, so a gather of 4 had decided to rest exterior within the tent. The gather included my more seasoned brother and his sweetheart, as well as my more youthful brother and me. That night I was woken up to the sound of a pontoon motor on the lake. Sometimes fishermen would go out onto the lake within the centre of the night, since they wouldn't have to be bargained with the daytime exercises of fly skies and boats. The anglers never came as well near to anybody else's property in spite of the fact that this engine motor, in spite of the fact that it was running discreetly, was getting closer to our shoreline where the tent was set up. My more seasoned brother had moreover been awoken by the commotion of the watercraft. so we went out together to check out what was going on. Strolling out onto our dock, we saw an angling pontoon gradually floating by, as it were almost 15 to 20 feet from our dock. The moonlight uncovered that the watercraft was Purge. We observed, befuddled, as the watercraft floated into our neighbour's shoreline zone by the waves on the lake. Both my brother and I stood solidified on the dock, not knowing what to think around what we were seeing. The quiet of the night was broken by our neighbour's pooch yapping, and after that our 2 mutts joined in on the woofing. My brother and I ran back down the dock towards the shoreline, and were approximately to begin strolling up the slope towards our cabin when a figure emerged from the obscurity of my neighbour's yard. The individual had a dark wetsuit on, and a few sort of cover with goggles on over their confront. Our cabin and our neighbour's cabin are near to each other, and we saw the figure run past us, almost 90 feet absent at most. They entered the pontoon, and after that drove absent back out onto the lake, looking towards my brother and me standing on the shoreline by our tent as they drove absent. We found out the another day that our neighbour's cabin had been broken into, but their canine frightened the individual absent sometime recently anything happened, or sometime recently anything was taken. It was an eerie experience, particularly fundamentally camping within the centre of all the activity, seeing the Purge pontoon and the figure escaping into the night. I do not think the individual within the dark wetsuit knew that we were camping out on the shoreline. Something else. I do not think they would have come so near with their vessel. Our family still goes to that cabin reasonably frequently and hasn't seen the watercraft or the figure within the wetsuit any longer, but our guardians utilize it as a frightening story. Overstating a bit to spook individuals sometime recently, they go out and rest within the tent on the shoreline. My companions from college and I attempted to remain as near as conceivable. After we had graduated from school, one of the ways that we would do typically by all of us taking a week off amid the summer or drop and going on a camping street trip. Final year, we had planned together and chosen to go camping within the mountains of Colorado towards the conclusion of the summer. Once our flight landed, we acquired our rental car, and we were off to the mountains for a few camping. The moment night that we were out there, we found a pleasant little camping range with person parts. The parts were removed from each other well sufficient to where it felt like our own individual campground, particularly with all the trees encompassing us. We had picked a parcel near to the little stream which streamed adjacent, near to the interstate, so that we might wash off after a long day of climbing. We set up our campsite while it was still light out that evening, so we wouldn't need to set anything up after dim. Once everything had been set up, we headed to a eatery within the closest town for a few supper. We arrived back at the campsite after dawn, and were surprised to see that our tent fold was open and stuff had been moved around exterior. There was no one within the clearing of our campsite, but someone had gone through our stuff. It was an aggravating scene, but we continued with our night. It was time to induce a few rests before long, so we snatched our towels and cleanser and strolled the brief 5-minute walk to the stream to wash off. The water was exceptionally cold, but it was still very reviving in a way. It wasn't until after we had all left the stream and were drying ourselves with towels on the stream bank that I take a note something across the stream on the inverse bank. There was 100% some person observing us. Not needing to caution my companions additionally, not needing to let the figure on the other side of the stream know that I had seen them, I recommended that we go back to camp. On the walk back to our campsite, I briefly clarified to my companions that I had seen somebody over the stream from us within the woods. Between that and the occurrence of some person scrounging through our tent, whereas we were gone, it was chosen that we would rest within the car tonight. It was as of now difficult to rest and get comfortable within the car, and the added uneasiness around the individual I had seen by the stream didn't offer assistance either. The total night I kept looking out the windows, seeing on the off chance that I would see anyone prowling around within the moonlight. At a few points within the centre of the night, I looked exterior the car window, and my fears were genuine. There was a figure hunching down by the entrance of our tent, gradually unfastening it. I observed in frightfulness as the individual rapidly found out there was no one in our tent, and after that turned their head towards our car. The figure gradually vanished around the back of our tent and started crouch walking closer to the car. I quickly woke up my companions at the same time, whereas coming into the driver's situate to blare the horn. The blaring of the horn was compelling as we observed the figure take off the campsite and vanish into the woods. What will always stick with me from that night is how the figure we had seen didn't run absent startled. They calmly fair stood up and strolled away from us into the woods, not bothered at all that we had seen them. No one got any more rest that night within the car as we remained up, alert and jumpy that the figure would attempt to return. We didn't have any more issues for the final couple of hours of the night until it begun getting light out. We had arranged on remaining at this camping area for 2 evenings, but it's unnecessary to say we didn't remain there for the moment night indeed, in spite of the fact that we had as of now paid for it. We proceeded the rest of our camping trip, moving to a distinctive campsite. Gratefully, there were no more issues the rest of the trip, but that night will be vivid in my memory for a long time. Thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Midnight Mysteria, for more amazing horror stories.